Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, and I have a return guest. I have Ben Tomes back on the show. He's an award-winning wrestling and mixed martial arts coach, as well as an author of The Confessions of the Unmedicated Mind series and an alienated parent. We have a lot to talk about and to cover regarding parental alienation and how the Depp Heard case can affect anyone in real life, in their own lives. And I welcome you back to the show, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me again. I had a blast last time and I was really looking forward to being back on, so I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad to have you on.
It's been a little crazy since I saw you last. There's
Yeah,
been
so I
some
hear.
stuff, both good and bad, that have come up. So
Oh,
my case closed.
oh,
18 days before my daughter turned 18, effectively I was eliminated from having any opinion or say on her life. So it ended as I anticipated. I am not one to typically expect failure, but knew that this was predetermined long ago. What I just didn't realize was how deeply entrenched it was to not really having any chance at being fair. There was a very interesting thing that happened the day before my case. Another case made major news in the same county. And it was interesting because my case follows a lot of parallels to other ones. A couple things that break off and are different were the lack of major false allegations. That never got to that point, and I'd like to kind of get into that a little bit later. But there was the arrest. I didn't ever get arrested, but there was a motion to have me arrested at the last meeting for contempt of court because the Guardian Ad Litem believed I had been videotaping Zoom hearings, which in Wisconsin, to my knowledge, is not even illegal. It's not against the law. And I don't think the law ever caught up when they started to do hearings by Zoom during the pandemic. But that was what they filed a motion for. But when that case broke the day before, so it made major news in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, a woman named Julie Valadez, who, if you're looking for other guests, she'd be amazing to get on. She is, what's happened to her is absolutely horrific. And so this case breaks out, and it turns out the judge was the same in mine, although an appellate court ruled in favor of her and said the judge acted with bias and discrimination towards her. So then they eliminated him and took the one that I had both out of family court. And so that happened right before I went to court. So I had a different judge, and that judge is now hijacking that case as well. And so he allowed that to continually be railroaded. But what we didn't know at the time was why the Guardian Ad Litem didn't show up for court. So she wasn't there. So she filed a motion to have me arrested, but she never showed up. And I found that interesting, but I didn't know at the time that that woman was the exact same Guardian Ad Litem at the exact same time as she was for mine. And so when you look at the two cases and lay them side by side, now it has the same judge involved and the exact same Guardian Ad Litem. And what's come up in that case is that there's a push to have her arrested, and she's being investigated because as part of their divorce, she somehow managed, according to the Julie Valadez and what they've put out through press releases, put their QDRO money in her own personal account. And some stuff started to really make sense. The Guardian Ad Litem, Catherine DiLorenzo, the attorney out of Milwaukee, was going through her own second divorce, which she took the case, mine and the Valadez case, knowing she was going through a divorce. She railroaded both of us the exact same way. And I don't think you have to be a genius to start to go and add things up and going, wait a minute, if you're about to lose a whole bunch of income by divorcing your longtime banker husband, it would add an awful lot of motivation to potentially go and railroad people for money. And my ex-in-laws, I guess we'd call them, were exceptionally wealthy. And it sounds as if that was the case with the Valadez one as well. Because when you read both cases, you go, how could you call that even an investigation? In my case, she never interviewed a single person I submitted, mocked me for having written too much, and was just a complete tyrant to deal with, and was like that from the jump. If I'm going to get treated terribly, at least let me fuck up and do something bad first. But that never even had the opportunity. She came after me immediately, and it never sat well with me, not just because it happened, but why would you do that? That makes no legal sense. In fact, unless you're taking money from people, I don't know how else to explain it. Why would you do that? The other alternatives are you're inherently evil, or you're just so grossly incompetent. There's no other alternative. So it's either shady and taking money, incompetent, or biased. Like and probably evil. There's almost no other ways to look at it, because in my situation, and then looking at the Valadez one, she hasn't seen her kids in 2 years. She's a documented domestic abuse victim where her ex-husband pled guilty to committing acts of abuse against her. And she's the one that got arrested through court. And she's the one that has not seen the kids in 2 years.
That's terrible.
And I've seen this, and it's like, it makes me shake my head. And, you know, on the surface, I wouldn't have ever felt, and I think society kind of tells us as a guy, you can't really be a victim of domestic abuse or domestic violence, but the reality is you can. And I think the definition of what is violence needs to be discussed, because I think as we get into some of the details, you'll find out that, you know, yeah, it's terrible to beat somebody up or to slap them or throw them around, and that's bad. But we also, I think, need to include what else would count as violence. And I think when you're dealing with somebody with malignant narcissism and borderline personality disorder, you are facing some stuff that is absolutely horrific and might not seem to others like domestic abuse, but as you get into it, it absolutely is, and has a long-term lasting effect. And there's different ways to do it. And I think been fascinated with the Heard Depp case, just simply because there was so much that was relatable, which I don't think is normally the case when it comes to celebrities. I think we normally step back and go, we can't really understand this. But in this one, it's not landing that way on people. I think men and women equally are like hearing this, and you can tell who the villain is in this story.
Right.
And I think you can recognize it pretty easily. And I'm fascinated by it, and I think I can help relate that to what it looks like in real life, because unlike Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard, we don't all have like troves of cocaine to go escape to at another room in the house, and like we don't all have those things. And so I think it looks a little different when it's on an everyday case, and they weren't together all that long. They didn't have kids together, but man, when I started to hear this, I could tell where this was heading if they ever did. So yeah, that's been the update in my case. That was where things kind of left off, and right now I'm working with a handful of other people, and started to really investigate and looking up Yelp reviews and Google reviews, and found several other people who have made comments about the Guardian Ad Litem in our case, including a social worker who, if I remember correctly, she went in by name, and she said she would not allow Catherine DiLorenzo to make decisions if it involved a houseplant, let alone a kid. And that is a Google review under the reviews on their page. And I've reached out to her and not heard back. There are a couple other dads that I've tried to locate online, trying to talk to them, that they had their own accounts on there about how terrible she was, and trying to coordinate all that stuff. But I believe that within less than a year, there will be charges filed against her that I believe could end up really being pretty explosive. I started to look into her. She has taught financial seminars to women on how to locate secret accounts from an ex and everything. So she's well versed in things that would like make it very possible for her to do that. And so, and then you consider she was divorcing president of a bank who had been there for quite a while. You start to look and do the numbers on it. You go, that is highly suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I found it interesting. You know, you don't always know if they're paying attention to some of the stuff you're doing, but about 3 weeks ago, I was got a notification on my phone that somebody looked at my LinkedIn profile. It was like, this person chose to remain anonymous. And what was funny is I clicked it anyway, and it showed who it was. I don't know why, but it was her and then her office assistant within an hour of that were both on my LinkedIn page, which I found kind of funny. So they haven't forgotten about me, and I haven't paid anything, and I'm not going to. They're going to come after me for it, but to me, it's just more fodder to go and be like, all right, so what's your real motivation here, and what are you doing? I'm not going to pay this until there's some level of justice applied to her. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the excuses that they had under their law firm's Google reviews was when people put that stuff on there, they would comment, this person was not a client of our firm. But here's the deal, if they were the Guardian Ad Litem, we actually were, and they're the ones sending the invoices. So I actually absolutely was a client of theirs. Whether they want to admit it or not, then have her send me a personal bill, not one from your law firm. And so I think that's such a cop-out to say, like, well, this person wasn't represented by us. If you're having people take gal cases, that's not really true. You're actually are being impacted and kind of unofficially represented by them. So I found that very interesting. The charges that she's looking at being faced for in the Valadez case could very easily apply to mine, because I reported some of the things I'll talk to you about today. She never investigated. And on a federal level, if they do not investigate allegations of abuse, then you are subject to being arrested and losing your freedom. And I think there's enough people who could come forward and say, hey, she did this, she did this, she did this. And I'll bet you there's an increase of it as she was going through her divorce. And we're watching it exceptionally close. I've got a small network of people I work with now, and we've got a couple things that we're putting into motion. And I think it's super crucial to do that, just because, you know, if I fight my case and I'm the only one doing it, it's easy to point a finger at me as a problem. But when you have, you know, 5, 6, 7 people who can go and do some things and reach out and do things for other people, I think it's the better way to go, because it's harder to dismiss. And I think I'm really hoping, as alienated parents, we get together and start to go and flood these people's inboxes and their email inboxes, and make sure that it's not just the person who went through this that's reporting it to go, because just like any other narcissist, they do not like to look bad. And I think most of them are narcissists. So this one, there's not an ounce of doubt in my mind. The way that she spoke to me, how arrogant she was, and the acts that she's engaging in, you can tell, like, she doesn't want any more of this to get out, and it's just the beginning, because I'll have a book out by this time, probably before this time next year, and possibly a documentary coming out not terribly long after that. So, like, I'm not going to hold back on any of this. I hope to make her famous, so just for the reasons that she probably wouldn't want, but so
she needs to be exposed.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the last time I was on your show was not long after I actually took a mixed martial arts fight. And I needed some time to think about if I wanted to do another one. I lost that one, so I wasn't so sure how I'd feel about it. I made the second oldest debut fight in MMA history at age 49. It was 49, 6 months and 6 days. And I'm hoping, and I think I've got it lined up, it's not official yet, but my intention is to fight July 16th, and that will be the night I turn 50. So I'm looking to do that. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And I'm greatly anticipating getting onto a car, but I am going to do at least one more. We're hoping it'll be that night. I figured it'd be the coolest 50th birthday party ever to go and plan on going to get in a fight and then actually doing it, but doing it in a completely legal way.
Right.
So I'm hoping that gets worked out. The one that we're trying to get on is in Fort Pierce, Florida, where I spend over half the year. So it'd be nice to do that down there. And as a result, I ended up getting nominated for Muscle and Fitness's magazines. They have a cover contest for older men who are doing something to stay in shape, or women that can enter this contest. But this one's the men's side of it. And so I'm in third place. I need to stay in the top 15 to advance to the next level. But I will have a link for you that people can go and click and vote. And I would greatly appreciate it if people could vote each day. It would help. I'm going to make alienation the focal point of why I'm doing all of this and what I'm hoping to go and create awareness for. So beyond that, I'm a spinal fusion recipient. I had a 3 vertebrae fusion on my lumbar spine. So L4, L5, S1 are fused. So lost in the shuffle of of my fight and kind of making alienation the main focal point, was that I believe I'm the first person to ever do a cage fight after having a spinal fusion. We can't find any evidence that anybody else has ever done it. And so we're working on that right now. But, if I could provide some inspiration to people who have been through that type of a surgery before too, I'd like to do that. But the primary purpose is to get the word out on alienation and start to educate people, because I'm seeing, even with people in my life, I did my own research. When I started to realize what was going on, I started to dive in. And I feel like I have pretty close to a clinical view of it at this point. And much like Johnny Depp, I married my mom. I mean, completely unwittingly, but I married a version of my mother. And so I've been on this planet for 50 years, and literally all 50 years I've dealt with nothing. I shouldn't say nothing, but I've had that as a constant, because even after the divorce, I mean, the case didn't end until 18 days before my daughter turned 18. And so I'm still dealing with it, and it's still not over, because the court found that for the time that was stolen from me by my ex-wife and with my daughter, that I have to pay back child support for that time, even though she makes 4 times what I make in a year, and that time was created through abusing our daughter. And however anybody wants to see it, these actions that people engage in, I don't care if it's not physical, it's flat out verbatim abuse. And so I'm basically being told I have to pay back money to somebody for the abuse that they inflicted on my child. And that's not going to go away quietly, not at all. I will make noise about it. I don't care if there's an arrest that happens with me. I understand completely that may happen with people, not because of anything I did specifically, but simply by raising noise with the family court system. So I go into this knowing, just like I go into an MMA fight, knowing, hey, I might win, but I could get KTFO'd, knocked the fuck out. That could happen at any moment in time. And in my fight, I did not get knocked out, but I got hit hard, the hardest I've been hit that I could ever remember in that fight. And I just remember, like, oh, wow, like, I'm awake, and that's good, but like you go through a little bit, and I know at any point in time by waging that fight, that could happen. But I'm not going to go away quietly. So if you could help me vote, that will get the word out there. And if you are compelled to pay for votes, it's free to vote, but you can buy votes, and that money goes towards homeless veterans. So Muscle Fitness Magazine is the magazine putting it on, and it'd be awesome if people could jump on and kind of help my cause a little bit. As you guys know, if you go through this, I don't care who you are, you're going to get exhausted for money. Someone with more will go and turn this into a resources contest. And when you see Brad Pitt losing his ass off to Angelina Jolie, what I see is the difference between 2 wealthy people, but you have old money and additional money, and then you have new money. And I think between, her family's money and all of that estate and everything else, plus her own really, really successful career, she could turn it into a game of attrition and basically drag it out as long as she needs to. And, I think when we look at these cases, sometimes there's a tendency to go, well, they're celebrities, it doesn't relate to me. But I also think for celebrities, people like us in these programs are invaluable, because I think just like, I actually have wonder, I don't know if Brad Pitt's even aware of what is actually being attempted to be done. He knows it's bad and he's fighting it, but then there's a difference when you know what alienation is and you recognize it and you know, oh shit, that's what that is. And I think you can be very successful and still completely lack knowledge over what's going on to you. And I think the Depp Heard case, man, I gotta tell you, there was some elements to that literally sat me down and like almost induced flashbacks. And it wouldn't be what I think everybody thinks. Johnny Depp recording the conversations, and you can hear the arguing, and that was the most haunting for me. And that really went back to the experiences I had in my marriage, which I think now, because I documented so much, can serve as a manual for people and go, hey, if this is going on, you're going to end up alienated if you've got kids. If this is going on, not only are you going to end up divorced, but you're going to end up being completely financially ruined when this is all said and done. I think these things are easy to point out if you know what to look for, and they're easy to recognize. Problem is, there's not a lot of education out there. And as much as I've educated myself, I can see in other people close to me that haven't a complete cognitive disconnect. They know that somebody acted like an ass. They know that. But there's a difference when they have no context for why I can predict what's going to happen next, why I can sit there and translate basically the way a narcissist communicates. When you study it enough, you know what's coming next.
Oh, yes.
You get very good at predicting. And,
yes.
I felt like some of the stuff that went on in my marriage is highly valuable to other people, because I think there are a lot of people sitting in my situation that may or may not actually even know what's going on to them. And so the Johnny Depp case and the Amber Heard case, to me, is I'm thankful that it's being aired publicly, and that people can see what it looks like. I've watched a lot of clips of it. The most haunting was hearing them argue. The deflection, the changing the subject, the screaming over good points that he was making when he's saying things, the mockery of him when he's like, I don't like it when you hit me, and she's calling him a baby and telling him he needs to grow up. And like, it was the chaos of arguing with them where you never get to solve the problem because they smoke screen, they deflect it. It's like they're playing a game of verbal tennis and slapping away anything that you might try to discuss, bringing up stuff that they've never addressed when you go to them with a concern, and then going, but I didn't say anything about this, and you've done this. And you're like, well, but you don't bring it up. And why would you bring it up now? You're just trying to deflect it. And I mean, it was so familiar. That was really haunting, because the hardest thing for me to describe to others is what it was like to argue with her. Is I could tell you the terrible things that happen and those things, but trying to solve it, you can't describe it to people who have never dealt with it. And if you go listen to those arguments, they are absolutely riveting, because that was the first time I've ever heard what it was like to be in my marriage. And it was the arguing, the discussions that went nowhere, and the deflecting and all of that stuff. So I really think that there's a lot to gain.
You know, the gaslighting, you know.
That was really bad. And, you know, telling somebody something didn't happen. I hit you, but I didn't close my fist, so that's not really a hit. Really, you know, and I think when you look at the consistency of Johnny Depp and how he's communicated, and like, it never wavers. He's the same when he was arguing with her. His demeanor, his stance never really changes. Now, was he perfect? No. But one of the things that's lost in all of this, if you're dealing with a tyrant who is absolutely going to nonstop come after you from within the confines of a relationship, and then even if you leave, you can't go and ask them, would you please not do that anymore? I don't like it when you do that. It doesn't work. In fact, I would argue it does the opposite, because now you've admitted to them it got to you, and it's just going to increase. And I've charted that stuff and watched it and been like, you know what, like, it doesn't pay for me to say, like, I don't like it when you do this, because all that happens when you do that is you get it 5 more times in a short amount of time. And I think, you have to, at some point, you almost have to match energy levels with it in order for it to be understood. What does Amber Heard understand? She understands chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he tried to escape it. He tried to get away from it. She'd chase him into other rooms. And, you know, there's an awful lot of things I think that can be drawn from there. And, you know, I think we were talking before about like what violence is and like what things people do that might not be viewed as domestic violence or abuse, but are highly abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see some of the court transcripts come out and you go, oh, wow, that's really familiar. I think you realize like, all right, I need to probably formalize some of this so people can recognize it. And I know the whole thoughts of what is violence. To me, violence is something that you do deliberately that has a long-term lasting effect on someone in a pretty significant capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Which by that definition, I mean, you obviously physical violence needs to be included. It's wrong and it's bad. I just don't think that's the only type of really destructive abuse somebody can engage in. And I can tell with my case, if you look at like things like a scale and you go, here's a narcissist, here is a malignant narcissist with borderline personality disorder, and then here's the person who has a histrionic version of that disorder, you can see, because my ex-wife did not commit like physical acts of violence against me, but I would argue had been exceptionally violent in other ways, and like emotional terrorism and doing things, and like there's finding a way to put a spin on it so that it can't just go away quickly. Before we were married, the stuff that started, and this never went away, was stonewalling you or ignoring you. Mm-hmm. And that would go on for 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer. And it didn't change after we got married or had kids. She could tune you out and just be in the same house with you for weeks on end and never acknowledge your presence. And like, it's terrible. Like, I mean, you're sitting there and oftentimes you don't even know what you did to cause it, and try to go and say, hey, like, is everything okay? Just walk away and have that go on for weeks. So I could tell anybody, if you're in the early parts of a relationship and somebody's doing that to you, get the fuck out now. That exactly. Is, even though it might seem kind of like innocuous, and if you think you want that alone time from them, that's not the same. It is, because they'll find ways to make sure that their presence is known. Doing little things, leaving messes out, doing things that are going to go and remind you that that they're there, but they're not acknowledging it. And like, those are things that I think that you've got to pay attention to on the early end, because they lead to other things. And it's testing the waters. How long can I ignore him before he says anything? How long can I do something terrible until I get a reaction from it? And I think people like Amber Heard, here's the deal, I don't doubt she's got PTSD. I saw one doctor skeptical of it, but there was one that said she has it, and they attributed it to intimate partner relationship with Johnny Depp. Here's the thing, I don't disagree that she has probably some versions of PTSD, but I'm highly suspicious of the reasons for it. Having been married to a similar version of this, but spending a lot more time in it than he did, and having kids, I can tell you, I think they are, Amber Heard, I believe, had, oh fuck, I totally lost my train of thought for a second, it'll come back to me. It's a lot, but she's, I could see kind of the parallelism, like how things kind of really got out of hand. And I recognized an awful lot of it. One thing with the ignoring, I think it does lead to a lot of other stuff. And I think the next section of it is gaslighting. They're doing things to you and then denying that they did it, not having it matter if they actually, having it not matter if they did, if you saw them, if you had evidence, if you witnessed it, if you were around for it, and you go, I saw you do that. I know what you did, and they deny it anyway. I think that's kind of one of the next steps in this. I can look back at our history, and the ignoring was a really big one initially. And while we were dating, there were like cracks that you'd see. And there was a definite like pattern of behavior where they loved everything you were into. You're amazing. And they like all the same music and they like all the activities. And so you kind of think, oh, I found this person that's resonating with me, but you don't realize this is an act. And this is the way that they kind of show love up front. And then wait for that moment when they feel like, I've hooked you, I've got you. And I really believe that it's folks like me that came from intact families where parents didn't divorce, but maybe things weren't very good in that marriage, where you're going to have it had hammered into you that you don't leave, that you stay and you finish out that marriage. And I think that plays a huge part. And let's think like kind of like hokey logic. That makes sense, right? Like find a partner whose parents are still together. Well, I think that sounds really good, but that's also a recipe for somebody who intends to abuse the hell out of that person and basically push their limits to see what it'll take to get them to leave. So, those are things that I think need to be looked at. And I think when you start to estimate like the violence factor of gaslighting, you are damaging somebody's psyche because it starts to really challenge their notion of reality, that they do this and it's so consistent. And like, no, I didn't do that. No, that didn't happen. That never happened. And you start to realize, wait a minute, like it takes a lot before you can kind of flip that script and see through it. And so I think gaslighting is something that becomes like one of the second forms of it. And some of that will have other behaviors embedded within it. My ex-wife cheated on me the 3 of the 5 years that we were together with my best friend, and I was unaware. I didn't know. He was my teammate of 4 years as a college wrestler and 2 years in football. He lived with my parents in the summers, and I had no idea that this was going on. And I started to catch on close to when we were getting married, and was trying to find a way to address it and get information about it. And I got a glass thrown at my head. That was one of the more attempts to be violent at me when I confronted it. Had a glass thrown at my head and immediately said, how could you dare say that? That would be like me having sex with my brothers. And turns out, well, the shoe fits, because it was happening and I confronted her on it. And eventually, within about a month to go before the wedding, got an admission that, well, they made out one time. Spider senses were going off like it's not true, but I didn't have a smoking gun for evidence. Like I didn't catch them, and this is in the days before cell phones, and I wouldn't go through somebody's stuff anyway, but like things were vastly different. I knew something was happening, I was adding it up, and I got vehement denials it was any more than that. And so that was lined up. He was lined up to be my best man, and I didn't want him anywhere near that place that day. And so that was one of ultimatums that I was given. And that's another version of this. If you're with a partner and you're not married yet, and there are ultimatums being given, you need to run, because that's testing the waters for what they can get away with later. By doing that, you're just trying to see like what you can get away with in terms of your partner. And in this case, I didn't feel good about it. And the ultimatum I was given was that if he's out of the wedding party, this wedding is off. And so that one, I had to give some thought to, and well, I don't want to be responsible for the wedding not happening. And what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong and I didn't pick, maybe I just misunderstood this. Maybe she is telling the truth. Even though in my heart, I knew there had to be more. There was no way I misunderstood that. Fast forward, we get married in April of 98, get to October of 98, and I am at my college homecoming and run into my friend's ex-girlfriend who, asked me, she's like, yeah, how are things going? I'm like, yeah, it's all right. She said, like, we were a little surprised that you guys actually got married. And I said, well, I had some reservations about things because of their history, but, I had to really swallow my pride and realize, all right, well, they screwed up and made out once. And she looked at me and she's like, is that what they told you?
Oh, no.
So we own a house together at this point. We're 6 months in, raised by Quakers who didn't ever divorce, even though they probably should have. And I'm sitting there going, I have nobody to go move in with. I don't
Mm.
know what else to do. And her family is in the area, but mine is not. So even retreating and going, I think I'm just going to leave and go back to my parents. I can't do that, but she had the option. So I find out about this and I go home and I confront her, and she admits reluctantly that it was true. And I'm like, you need to leave. And she refused. I said, you need to go. I don't have any place to go. Your parents live very close to where you work. You can go and you need to go. And she wouldn't. And when she refused, I said, you don't do this. I'm going to call your dad and tell him why you need to be out there. And so she played a game of chicken with me and she lost. And I called her dad, told dad what happened. He got real quiet and he just said, you know what, all I can do is say, sorry, I didn't raise her to be like that. Put her back
Oh,
on. And then she left. We
huh.
didn't divorce, gave it 6 months, and then we had repaired things. But I think when you take that down and you look at it, you go, it's not going to just be cheating. They're going to do cheating on steroids and find a way to take what would already be considered by many people an act of betrayal, or at least something that's really hurtful. But I think when you start to factor in, that was a college teammate of mine for 4 years in 2 sports, lived with my parents, is the godfather of my niece, and managed to go after that. This is one of the tenets that they're going to do. They're going to go after people you know.
Hmm.
And it's going to be cheating on steroids. It's not enough just to go and have that experience with somebody at random. They need it to dig in and they need it to hurt. And if you find out about it, they'll deny it until they're blue in the face. And unless you have really, really captured them in it, and like with me, I had enough, and I knew that woman, and I knew that she wasn't lying. I mean, it fit in with everything else. And then, sure enough, over the years, stuff started to come out, but that impacted friendships I had for 4 years. That impacted relationship that I had with the college I graduated from. I went to a real small school, and
Hmm.
allegedly the athletic department was aware and like was uncomfortable with it, like anticipating a problem. This was bad. He couldn't have picked other than like my actual brother. I don't know that there could have been a worse person to have picked to go after. That pattern didn't change. It never changed. So eventually you start to see it come up in other areas. And you know, the ultimatums that were given, and then, things like the cheating, these things are not going to get better. They're not going to
Hmm.
go away. They might get hidden for a while and there might be lapses, but they're going to come back. And I think that's one of the things that I really was listening to this case and going, you know what, there are signs. And I think Johnny Depp saw those signs but didn't know what they really meant. Knew it was
Right.
a problem but didn't know how big. And
Well,
I can look at several other incidents that, if we get into, you know, after the marriage
hmm.
began. I remember there was another cheating incident, and it was at it was a 4th of July party at my kid's friend's parents' house.
Hmm.
And so we were over there, and I have a nephew with me, and one of my athletes who was with us, and we just went to what was like essentially kind of a kid party with adults there.
Uh-huh.
There was a neighbor there, and I picked up early what was going on, and it made me highly uncomfortable. And she was very flirty with this guy, and was actually pushing somebody on me, kind of in a weird way, and it was kind of bizarre. And but I was kind of just watching it. At this point, this is years later, 2009. I'm pretty broken at this point, having stayed in that marriage and not left, and dealt with a lot of this stuff. And she actually left the party with that dude and went to their house. And I knew what was going on, so I went outside and took a picture of them arm in arm as they walked in the house. The next day, when I addressed it, denied that she even talked to him that day, and I just pulled out my phone and went, "Here you go." Like, really, you're gonna lie about it? Then I was petty and a creep because I took pictures of them going in. But I knew that they denied. I knew it would be denied,
Hmm.
and that was, again, it's not enough to just go do something. It needs to be put on display and have people see it. And so, they go after things that you tend to be decent at. And they also have a tendency to have these incidents either come at your expense if you're with their people, or will embarrass and humiliate themselves if it's in front of your people. and where it would do long-term damage. And I think that's one of the things that I know we dealt with. I know we were at a wedding in 2008, and my ex-wife got kicked out of it, which is virtually impossible to do. I come from a hard drinking part of northern Wisconsin. If you get kicked out for being drunk, you're an asshole, because you can't find a more tolerant group of people when it comes to alcohol infused bad behavior. But there it was, simulating sex acts on a dance floor, got kicked out and thrown out in front of friends, family of mine that were there, and just sat in horror and watching this. And we flew 1,200 miles to go to that wedding. I was the best man in it. And she has got lit up and did that stuff. And, you know, I'm fortunate. My friends are forgiving people, and they you know, they're prone to getting a little tipsy every now and then too. But like, that was really bad, like really bad. And that was pretty brutal. And it was one of the more major incidents that had happened, but it wasn't the worst. The worst, I tell you, this is where I really think it's crucial to have these discussions. I could give hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things and incidents that she engaged in that would tip you off that this is a problem. But it got to be very dangerous. And if you've got anything going on that's exploitable, like your health, you are in extreme danger. The movie Misery, as much as it's, you know, treated like fantasy, there's an element of that I kind of lived. I had that 3 vertebrae back fusion in 2009. Was told I could never be physically active again, that I couldn't run. And that was after the surgery. I had to be completely sedentary, and that I should apply for disability benefits and probably forget about working where I'd be on my feet all day. And I was pretty devastated. I was 37 years old. Like, I don't want that for the rest of my life. But, you know, the surgery was complicated. The surgeon ended up in prison because he got caught using fake parts in people. And so the belief is that the parts in my back are probably not real. Now, they might hold up just fine, but the surgeon's name was Cully White, and he was indicted on federal charges for using fake parts and for committing insurance fraud. Now, I married a pediatric surgical registered nurse who had administered medications for a living, and who had done so every day while she was a nurse at the hospital and had to monitor that stuff and knew it well. She also knows the medical field exceptionally well. And so the only person I have in my life at that point that knows that stuff is her. I had friends telling me that they were not liking what the doctor had said and how some of the stuff didn't seem to add up. And then that all got dismissed. So she handled all of that. In the wake of it, this is not terribly long after the July 4th incident. So when narcissists go and do things like cheat on you at a party, when the dust settles, they start to be suspicious of you and wondering what you must be up to. And so if you're dealing with somebody who is giving you vibes like they're doing some stuff, but they're all over you for about what you might be doing, that's another huge, massive red flag that not only might you get alienated, it might actually be worse. You may end up really dealing with somebody who's got some severe issues. And so as her paranoia started to grow, she she wanted to go through my computer, and she wanted to see what I was communicating to other people. And we were not on good terms, so I wasn't about to just go, oh, okay, sure, you can do that. So my medication prescription after the surgeries, after the last surgery, was 2 oxycodone, 2 Lyrica, and a tizanidine when I would wake up in the morning. It knocks you on your ass. Like, you're loopy and you're tired, and like, you can't work if you're on it. Like, it's not really possible. So I'm home and I'm doing recovery, and it would last for about 8 hours. And then I had to take a second dose. Well, she administered my medication to me in the morning. I ended up taking a nap, falling asleep for part of it. I was not supposed to be driving for up to 3 months. I needed to be completely shut down. And this surgery I had was major. This was not small. This was a large 3 vertebrae spinal fusion right in my lower back. And she she was dead set to go through my computer. So she put a pencil in it after she gave me a second dose 3 hours later. I'm completely looped up, and I'll never forget this though. She guided me by my arm to the car, took both kids, put them in the car, and said, take these kids to the pumpkin farm and get them pumpkins. And I started driving and got about halfway there and realizing this is messed up. Like,
Mhm.
what's going on here? I pulled over, I was dizzy, my head was spinning. That dosage could have been extremely caustic to me. I don't know if it's enough to have killed me, but it definitely, it's medication you don't mess around with.
Right.
And I couldn't believe it. So when we tell people that there's no limit, that they'll do anything to go and meet that incessant need for information that they can use to control you with, they'll
Mhm.
do it. They'll absolutely do it. And for somebody, who cheated on me multiple times, known that it happened, lied about it, wouldn't have even been in the marriage had she been honest, I would have never followed through.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's my own fault for having stayed. But you realize, holy shit, this person would do anything if it
Mhm.
meant a means to an end. And she's still practicing as a licensed registered nurse in
Mhm.
Wisconsin. And that shouldn't be. That was the most, that was easily like the most damaging one. But some other stuff to look out for: if there is a relative that is nearby and close to her, and they have a background in social work or therapy or anything else, but they're woefully devoted to their narcissistic sibling, um, you're going to get alienated.
Mhm.
There's literally, as I went through and I started to do the research, and I'm like, there's 17 points you can prove. I can prove 13 of the 17, but really it's 13 of 14 because the other three she's never remarried, so they don't apply. So of the 14 that you can have if they never remarry, I have tangible hard evidence of 13. There's no way it's fluke. There's no way it's an accident. And when you start to read up on alienation, you go, wait a minute, somebody taught her how to do this. And
Mhm.
that is exactly the scenario in my situation, because her 52-year-old, 450-pound sister, who's never moved out of mom and dad's house, is a licensed therapist and is the parent coordinator for Waukesha Catholic Charities. You cannot tell me, and that woman has had a corrosive impact on my kids, and I believe actually, as much as I dislike my ex, the one driving that bus is the sister, and she had intimate knowledge of this. And there's no way that either one of them didn't employ professional knowledge to basically go with surgical precision and just do what you needed to do to sever relationships and go ahead and nix them. And so that was something that I really think is overlooked quite a bit too,
Mhm.
because you have to have financial resources and you have to have flying monkeys. If you don't have that, carrying this out successfully is going to be really hard.
Mhm.
And I
I
think
agree.
it's absolutely crucial to follow and to look at. Um,
And did you think when you met your ex, did you think like Johnny Depp said, she's too good to be true?
yep. And you realize, so my background is, as much as I was a teacher for
Mhm.
23 years, I still am online. Um, as much as I did that, my background in education, I was a terrible student from a dysfunctional home. My parents raised us as Quakers and just hammered us with religion. I mean, like nonstop and really judgmental and really toxic. It was, my parents didn't abuse drugs or alcohol. They didn't need it. They freebased Jesus is what they freebased.
Mhm.
And like to a point where they're suffocating and they're telling you you're going to go to hell all the time for anything they suspect that you're doing. And you know, I came along, I met her. I had a 1.9 GPA for high school. Because of sports, I was able to get in somewhere, and I had a good ACT score. So I overachieved compared to my GPA. But she knew that I was dysfunctional, and I'm open. I tell people about our issues, and my family had a lot of them.
Mhm.
And that family also had an awful lot, and they had hidden sexual abuse. They had hidden it internally, even from the uh, other members of who ended up getting abused. And then even the father, whose father was the one committing the abuse, they never told dad what happened until it was later in his life that he actually learned about what happened. And so, they were going to fight to the death to make themselves look normal compared to me. And to this day, we're the only one that got divorced in that family, and that's like a cardinal sin in their book, that you don't leave. And it's saying murder yes, divorce no. And it sounded funny till I got drugged and put into a car with the kids and said, "Go get these kids pumpkins," so she could go through my computer. So it's funny how sometimes that hokey wisdom that these families like to go and spit at you, but you start to look through it and you're like, actually, they take some of that shit pretty seriously. Whether it was a joke at the time or not, it still came up. And in the marriage, I think if there's decisions being made and they start sandbagging on the ones that you're given leeway on to actually make, they will sabotage it by undermining. They will do that with you, with your kids. If you have kids, they are going to denigrate you in front of the kids. I can tell you, my daughter was one of the driving forces why I filed for divorce. I saw exactly what they were doing, and it didn't end up working on an alienation front until she was 16. We got divorced in 2012, so she was 8. It didn't just happen, it took time. And it would have actually, I think, been worse had we never divorced. It would have just been bludgeoning. And then when it's in front of the kids, how do they respect you? My ex-wife physically taught our kids not to respect me. Like, I watched it happen. And if they do give you a decision like, "Oh, we'll move where you want," they're going to tank it. They will completely stop contributing. They will not be participatory in the relationship. They will be late whenever you need to be on time. They will do everything in their power nonstop to do that. They'll become contrarians. They'll go against everything you say. And here's where you see this really get sad, is when you see the long-term impact on your kids. I can give the most innocuous, good, simple advice. It's not heard that way. There's a slant, like a narcissistic slant, that goes on to communication, and it always slants. And it's just like, if those incidents that they engage in are always at your expense in front of your people, or they're mocking you in front of theirs and just making you look like an ass, that's not an accident, that's on purpose. Because if it was random and they just sucked, it would happen at both of them equally. But if it doesn't, and it's the same thing on this, they're gonna go and make bad faith deals. They'll agree to something and then just sabotage it. They'll be contrarians. They're gonna go against every single thing that you think. And so bad faith deals, if they tell you that, "Oh, if you do this, I'll follow," and then you don't do it, that's going to get worse in the divorce. That won't go away unless you jump it early. And I think people should, if you make a list of the things that they have unfettered control of: religion, schedule, social calendar, education decisions, medical. If they're making most of the decisions and you're being phased out on those, you're going to be alienated. It's a precursory behavior that it's telltale. If that stuff is happening, you're going to end up either being raked through the coals financially, or you're going to try to have them. They're going to try to take your kids away from you and damage those relationships. They can't take them away from you; they'll just damage them as bad as they can. And I've watched that play out in my case, consistently. The whole, like, losing interest in your stuff, being condescending, talking down to you in front of other people. Like, you can't discount those things as being really, really harmful. And I think after the marriage is over and you leave, you're not going to probably get alienated right away unless this stuff has gone on for a really long time and it's really deep. And sometimes kids are really deeply impacted. But I think when the marriage is over, stuff starts to look different. There's some things I think you should be aware of. One, if they move near you after you guys break up, that my ex-wife moved 2 blocks from me after I bought a house. She waited till I bought one and then bought one two blocks away. When I was across town, told the kids that where I lived was dangerous. It was bad. And I laugh about that now. I was literally kitty corner to where we went to college together. That neighborhood is not bad. You
Oh.
know, it's so like those types of things, you know, kind of like hounding you and making sure that they're in close proximity to you. It's not because they want to be with you. This is so that they can, without disrupting their own life, continually barrage you, show up at your house. Suddenly the kids are always missing something. They have an excuse to stop by and swing by. And so that's something I would take very, very seriously. If they do anything with medical stuff behind your back, with the kids.
That's another one. Yes.
Huge. In our case, her sister-in-law was the secretary at my son's school. So her brother's sister. And, you know, he had significant health problems related to taking ADHD medication as a child. That one, so it hurt him. It stunted his growth. It didn't work particularly well. And he was never in trouble in school anyways. He's a scramblehead and extremely intelligent, and probably didn't need any of that, probably needed a more rigorous school environment. But because she had access to a sister-in-law at school, it opened the door. And it's amazing how many of these alienators have people in the exact right position to do what they need and do their bidding. And so she put my son back on the same ADHD medication that led to him having 2 stomach scopes and stunting his growth. And the doctor saying, this is terrible for him, he's got to get off. So we got him off and said, you know, you're going to have to learn to fight through this through school and just be focused. And he was like, all right, you know, had to resolve with it. And he didn't like taking the medication. Come to find out, she told him to lie about it, put him back on the medication, used the sister-in-law at school and gave her medication, said on the days he's with Ben, you're going to give these to him at school. And he came home and he told me about it immediately. And like, so I jumped on it. But if that stuff is happening, it's funny. This is a pediatric surgical registered nurse using influence and power and medical knowledge, that basically disregarding the medical knowledge she had and what we were told by the doctors to do this because, well, somebody on those meds is going to be easier to control to a degree. You're going to have less interference, at least that's the perception. And all while that was going on, my son was getting more and more distraught. One of the things that I saw happen after the marriage was the stuff that used to happen to me happened to him. And he would come back and report it. And these are things I never told him about or talked to him about, but he's telling me, and these are identical behaviors to things that I witnessed firsthand and was subservient to, and I got bludgeoned with. But as you take away that access to people and you wall them off, and even if you have to communicate with them, it's gonna come out on whoever is closest that they can put in that role. So it was terribly traumatic to hear about all this stuff because I knew what it had done to me. And I knew how painful it was, and I knew the details of it. And, you know, so we started talking, and he made the decision he wanted to transfer to the school where I worked at. She was showing up, interfering with his business at school. Then you had the medication thing. So he asked me if I would take it to court and help him transfer. And I said, if that's what you want, I will do it. And he got punished for it. He never changed the schedule. He didn't say he wanted to not stay by her on any extra nights, but he wanted some distance. So I moved about 15 miles from Waukesha to Milwaukee. I got a house in the city near downtown. He had his driver's license by then. He never missed a day in terms of like the normal schedule. He would go back and like stay by them on the same days that he did. My ex-wife never wanted a 7 on, 7 off schedule, which I would also tell you, if somebody's opposed to that, the reason is they can't manipulate it with kids' schedules. They will bludgeon you with the kids' schedule. And so if they say, oh, I don't want to do 7 on, 7 off, it's absolutely solely for one reason. It's because they can't schedule stuff on your nights because the following week, that's going to be their problem. So like you have to be mindful of some of those things. And In this case, my son transferred, and you know, it's the gaslighting. So she gave away his spot in the garage at her house to her brother so he could store his sports car in there for the winter. And told my son, well, he just needs a place to go. This is a guy who's made huge money, could
Mm.
afford to put that car in storage wherever he
Mhm,
wants to.
mhm.
But suddenly now it's that, and he's like, but why would you do that? Like, and I was upset not because of the car. I didn't care that the car would be outside, but I have a 16-year-old who's scraping windows, and like driving through the winter to get to school early, and in a usually in somewhat of a rush to get there, and now having to drive when he was at her house 25 minutes or so to get to campus. And just thought that was terribly irresponsible, but
Mhm.
it was the response she gave. He's like, why would you do that? Why did you give it to my uncle? And she's like, well, your father doesn't even have a garage at his house.
Oh, well,
And that's
yeah,
such an Amber Heard response. It doesn't
right.
answer the problem. And it's gaslighting. You absolutely dealt with that woman for over half my life. I absolutely know that was on purpose, and I've watched it happen. And anybody with a brain would go, no, you're punishing him, and now you've got a younger kid watching this, being
Oh,
used as the example, as I will withdraw love. I'll stop going to your events if you stand up to me. I will
mm,
withdraw. I'll show up, interfere, and then leave at those things. And
mhm.
his decision to transfer schools put him on a wrestling team I was the head coach of. His sophomore year, I had to coach against his team while he was on it,
Oh,
so it was a little tough,
mm,
but we did it. And, I scheduled as much as I could with my team around his meets so I could be at some of them. And then we were at 2 matches with them that year. So I
mm.
still got to see quite a bit of it. But, it was terribly painful for him to see, and that, he kind of wanted to be part of the group that I had anyway. And I'd never coached him in sports, really. I was a coach. I wanted him to have other people coach him. I wanted to be dad.
Mhm.
And so, watching that go down the way it did, and how there's been a piggybacking on that. If you're seeing that stuff and there's other kids below them in age, this is being done as an act to show that child what will happen to them. If
It's
you see that,
brainwashing.
oh, absolutely. Making sure that they do that. And that's even if you're trying to instill just simple good values, like it's important to keep your space clean. It's
Mhm.
important to contribute to the house at least a little. Those things suddenly are bad and exploitable, because if you know that, you go, oh, well, I just won't have you do any chores ever. You, you'd be as slobby as you want. You
Mm.
eat whatever you want, whenever you want. It's always contrarian. So that same level of I'm going to go opposite of you all the time, that is going to spill over into the marriage, and you're going to see it less, and you're going to hear about it less.
Mhm.
And so those things are concerning. If you start dating somebody and now all of a sudden they have somebody,
Mhm.
like almost instantly, it's funny because you can see it, and if it happens more than once, it's absolute deliberate. They're in competition with you. This is trying to go and keep up with you. And it's funny in our case, like how perfectly consistent that was, and how like I always call it Bizarro world. It's like what's good is bad, and what's bad is good. The Superman character Bizarro, Superman came in, and everything Superman stood for was bad. Well, I'm a teacher. I'm a 2-time national coach of the year. I have worked with kids that come from intense poverty and terrible abuse, have for years, and that was the platform that I got attacked on. And when you sit there and can look at your own history and go, but I've led and taught hundreds, if not thousands, of people to be better humans and to be good parents, and what it looked like to be a dad.
Mhm.
And then you go, I don't have access to mine, and there's
Right.
been no allegation that I was ever a shitty parent. They didn't need to. It was a predetermined outcome. They
Mhm.
never once made an allegation of that. I was a bad parent until the alienation actually started. And then they cherry picked some things and threw it at me that I had said in text messages, but were taken way out of context and not shown in their actual form. And you start to realize like that outcome was determined before we really got into it. So,
I
you
you know,
know,
I
I,
think. I think
Go
a
ahead.
lot of these cases are. I think you know what? I really think a lot of these family court cases are already predetermined before we
I,
get in there.
oh, I believe absolutely. And I think the people who have been alienated, we might have been too nice. I
Oh,
think a lot
yes,
of us,
you
we're,
nailed it.
we're empaths. And
Mhm,
you, even when you know, it takes a significant breaking point where you stop believing that there's good in some folks. Because your nature is to kind of think that there's got to be good in there somewhere. There has
mhm,
to be, right? This can't be all bad, but there is bad. There's so, there, and I think for this, we just kind of chalk it up to, well, they just don't care. They're not very competent. They're not educated on alienation. I actually think that that's probably not true. I think the real reasons might be much more greedy and sinister, in that even if they're not taking bribes, that they are making deals with other attorneys to go and just go, I won't contest that one, you won't contest this one.
mhm,
And in Wisconsin, it's only attorneys as guardian ad litems. So they have this is like a golden goose. Like, you can find one or two you always recommend, they'll always recommend you.
mm,
And you can go in there, half-ass it, and make a whole bunch of extra money on top of the cases you're already defending. But I actually really truly believe that it's much more sinister than that. And I believe that one of the keys to tackling this is to go after these people like they were human traffickers. And I
mhm,
think that some of the laws are already in place, because if you just take it on straight language, if you participate in the prevention of a family member of being able to see that child, that is almost in all states, that's enforceable. Um,
mm,
in Wisconsin, it's a felony to manipulate child placement, but you will not find anybody that'll take it forward.
mhm,
But my
mhm,
advice, if these things are happening to you, call the fucking police. Do it. Don't sit there and hesitate. If this stuff is happening to you, they make a bad faith deal, like, let's trade days. Okay. And then you go, all right, well, can I have the kids? And then they don't do it.
mhm.
Turn it in. And if they do nothing, turn it in again the next time when it happens, and you do it repeatedly. Um, I think you have to do that. I think you have to realize that you probably need to be the one that files first if you're going to split.
Mhm,
Don't wait. If you see these behaviors, um, I can't stress this enough. Your life depends on it,
mhm,
because if it gets bad enough, and if they have the level of histrionic um, traits that go and make something just go and blow this up out of even worse,
mhm,
like, you don't know what you're going to deal with. I had mentioned earlier there was never a false allegation made in mine.
mhm.
And that stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you, if you have a case that looks like all of these other ones, and it's clinical and it's textbook, and it right down to, even though I didn't get arrested, they tried to, they had a motion for it, and she chickened out and she didn't show up for court. I think it was probably because she knew I was going to connect that case to it. You know, that broke the day before. I didn't find out for about 2 more weeks that she was the Guardian Ad Litem in that case. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, no way. The exact same person, really? In a giant metro area like Milwaukee? The same person, railroads the same way. That's not a coincidence. And I was going to ask, why do you think they never made a false allegation? And I can only come up with a couple of reasons, but I was curious to hear yours.
You know, maybe they didn't come up with one, um, because they were waiting. Maybe they were waiting for the right time, and the right time just never happened.
Could I tend to believe there's two potential possibilities. One, because they already knew this was slam dunk, they wouldn't need it, and that would only put it in jeopardy.
Mhm,
In that they already paid somebody off. And again, I don't know for sure that happened, but it sure gives the impression like that could have happened.
mhm,
And it sounds like there's other factors that have giant neon pointy arrows aiming right at it, is one. The other one is, if you have in a family that has hidden abuse before, and someone is aware that something happened, but if you stir up that pot, that could go and blow the whole thing up.
mhm,
And so I don't think it's any accident that my ex-wife has sat there and engaged in what her parents never did. Her mom allowed her to be abused. They knew of the abuse already.
Mm.
Two of the children had reported it. She got abused and then suppressed it and remembered it when she was 21. So when you look at that and you realize, wow, that's actually what allegedly drives the bus on people that have borderline disorder. And it's one of the reasons I think that women have it at a 3-to-1 clip compared to men, because I think they tend to endure sexual abuse probably at about the same clip. And so I think, guys, it's not that guys can't get abused. It does happen, but I think it's a little less likely. And so that might account for some of that difference. And I think it's either because they already knew that case, it was already done. They paid for it.
It's all over. It's all
wash
over.
their hands of it and it's finished.
Yep.
Or it's much worse in that there could be something sitting there. And again, I don't have evidence, but I mean, if you've covered it up once, in what is to say you wouldn't do it again? And these are people who have clinical knowledge of child psychology, child behavior, and make absolutely horrific choices. Anyway, and I think that's something that's really important to factor in, because I think if you don't, you're going to end up being the punching bag for the rest of your life. And even though my daughter turned 18, I don't expect to hear from her until she's out of the house. But there's no given in that family that you'll leave the house, because the aunt that's caused a lot of the problems is still living at home. She's in her 50s.
Wow.
Never lived on her own. Not once, not ever, has never moved out. She's been there since the relationship started. 1993 is when I met my ex. It's been that way ever since. Never had a relationship of any substance ever.
That's
And
interesting. And probably no autonomy either. She can't think for herself.
No. And now you look, generation before that, an aunt, exact same situation. And a generation before that, there was another one. And so it's no given that she's going to leave that house. I hope she does. But the reality is she suddenly, I'll bet you, local community college is going to seem really enticing. And let's just take some time to adjust. And I could tell you that even though I've got pretty much everything else walled off, this isn't done. I am the coping mechanism. It's me. And again, I hate making it sound that egocentric, but when you've been, somebody has viewed you as their abuser for your entire time, even though you weren't, and they never actually confronted or dealt with the person who engaged in it, like, you're never getting away from it. This is a life habit at this point. So, I'm curious to see where this comes back. But I really, really want to get word out, and I'm excited for the book to end up dropping sometime later this year or early next, so that people have a guide. Like, if this is happening, here's what's going to happen. This is what it's going to lead to. And I think it's absolutely crucial that we do that, or we're going to end up seeing more and more people fall into this trap. So I hope some of this was helpful for people. Again, if anybody wants to know, I didn't even scratch the surface on a lot of them. Ton more. If you want more information, I know you always include how to reach out to people. And the last time I had a boatload reach out to me, and that was also very, very exciting and engaging to hear other information and to hear other stories, and also very, very, very disheartening to hear how bad the system is. I've read some horrific court paperwork, and then like inexplicable decisions that you just cannot believe actually went into court record, and they still decided against it. And I'm excited to go and really get to where this stuff is getting exposed. And I hope if you are dealing with these things, do not be afraid to reach out to me or anybody else in these groups and ask, is this normal behavior? Even if you're not alienated now, once you are, getting it to be fixed is virtually impossible in the current state of the system. So if it gets to that point, don't give up. I'm not trying to tell you you're fucked, but I gotta tell you, your work is cut out for you to try to overcome the weight of it, because even if you win legally, that child is damaged. that child might end up okay, but that kid has been compromised if all that has happened. So, you could fix the legal side of it and still not necessarily have the parental side of it fixed, because that damage isn't going to go away overnight. It's going to take a while.
Hmm.
So, I
Well,
hope that this stuff.
yes, I'd like to have you back on, because
Love to.
if you just scratch the surface, we should also keep going. So,
Oh, I tell you the look, certain things. Not giving you your stuff back
uh-huh.
after marriage, keeping your name but trashing you endlessly. And I found out recently, the day after my daughter turned 18, my ex-wife petitioned to have her name changed, and I had asked her repeatedly, please drop my name. I don't like, we're not together. Like, and you do nothing but trash me to whoever will listen. Why do you want my name?
Hmm.
Why? If I was that bad, if somebody was that bad to me, I would drop that name
Oh,
faster
yeah.
than you imagine. And to keep it, and then to go and change it and petition to change it literally the day that after she turned 18. Like,
Interesting.
well, they see 18 as it's an end. You're an adult now. I've exploited you to the like, and I think that one of the things that I used to, when she would do really damaging things to the kids, I would say to her, "You're not thinking about Thanksgiving in 2030. You're thinking about now." And trying to, I said, "You're gonna lose all that later." Like,
Hmm.
and out of concern, and I still to this day, I do not want either of my kids to be at constant odds with their mother. I don't
Hmm.
want that. Like, I had to cut mine out. I married my mother, and like, there's no reaching her, and has gaslit me as an adult not terribly long ago. So that never happened. That never happened. Like, it did, Mom, and there are people watching, and like, this isn't a discussion. And so I don't want that for my kids. I want them to have a relationship, but it's very difficult when you realize I have to, like, there needs to be boundaries. And I
Hmm.
have infinite amount of wisdom because I've dealt with this for literally 50 years.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
and two similar behavior patterns. And like, it's possible, but you've got to have borders and boundaries. And if
Hmm.
those things aren't in place, then that's going to be very difficult. And the end result will be a blow up that costs a relationship 5 or 10 years from now. And, it's been challenging to know what I know and to get that to happen. There's so many things, condescension, manipulating little things within the relationship, things like sex and money. Like, you
Hmm.
learn how to go and withhold those things and
Hmm.
distribute it as you see fit to get whatever you think you want in that moment. And
Oh, yes.
platforming things to get to you. So you go and you get, rejected a whole bunch on intimacy lines, and then you stop initiating, and then you can follow it like water. It'll flow to the next level, meaning, well, then it's going to go towards initiating it with you then falling asleep in it, or just avoiding it after it's been discussed or initiated. Like, you can see the patterns, and then if they can't do that, then they'll just go and find somebody else to go do stuff with, and it's probably going to be somebody who you hold in pretty high value, and probably know pretty well. So you see those things, the intercepting people after the divorce as like badges of honor. Like, I kept that family member. They know you're terrible. They know you're terrible, so I kept them, and I kept relationships. Or, they mine would reach out to my friends and just like, it was so gross. Like, fish for
Hmm.
information, and all of them would tell me immediately, like, hey, she's trying to like kind of like shimmy up to me and get info on you after we split up, and you know it's gross. Like,
Oh.
who does that? I didn't not once reach out to her friend group or her family and be like, oh, you should, I just kind of went, all right, well, you keep yours in the divorce, I'll keep mine. But that wasn't the case. She went after multiple people of mine that she tried to go and hang on to.
Mm.
And, never giving you space ever, even after the divorce, you know, showing up, the ignoring you, that never went away. Um, you know, Mocking you if you're sick, uh, making fun of you. Um, Come back
That's
to
terrible.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. You're just a baby, Johnny. You're just a baby. But
Mhm.
those words that she uttered at the end are going to end up being the deciding factor of that. When she's like, "Go ahead, Johnny, tell the world. I, Johnny Depp, am a victim of domestic violence." And he goes, "I am."
Mhm.
I thought that was extremely telling to that entire uh,
Oh, yes.
debacle. Um,
Oh,
that she actually said the words, like she,
oh
because
my
and she,
God.
to me, that just completely whatever she has said in her chance to speak now. I'm sorry, but it's pretty laughable. And
Mhm.
I'll bet you, if you were to go and somebody with close knowledge to it, there's probably, when I say elements of truth, not that he did the abusive things, but did he pass out from drinking and drugs? Probably.
Mhm.
And that's probably a quick shield that she's used at times to go and hide behind. Um, the um, I think so. I think things like that you have to really take into account as like, oh shoot, like this
Yeah.
person's not going to let up, and the pooping in his bed.
Oh, yeah, that is bizarre. Uh,
um, you
uh,
can't say, but when they see red, it's going to be what's going to be the most. And I can't say that I ever witnessed that, but I have seen a complete disconnect from reality and actually projecting things that they had seen as if it was them. So I know the level of crazy it'll go to. And my ex, I can't say, I'd love to tell you that she was a bed pooper. That would make it almost kind of funny. But she's not, so I can't. That was never anything that came up. But and you kind of look at it. Did incidents though that were on par with it happen? Well, yeah, but just because they didn't do that didn't mean that there wasn't like some type of um, uh, terrible thing that happened that was basically the same thing in a different form. And
Mhm.
so I can see that, but you can't really play the game of looking at every act has to be the same. It is, what is an act of violence, be it emotional or physical, and giving it its just due. Like, this is a problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is bad, and so those are all things. I think I said, like, not giving you stuff back. One thing that I'll never forget was in 2019, because it was the last Christmas I had with my daughter. And
Mhm.
by August of 2020, I was alienated for the second time. First time was 6 weeks and was tested. My son intervened and said, "Mom, I know what you're doing. You need to stop." And 3 weeks after that, she did, and my daughter came home, and came home in November. That was leading in, just by the way, as a high school wrestling coach, that happened as the season started. Knowing that her
Uh,
son was on the team, and that my life changed significantly during that time, because I coached the whole time we were married. She knew, like, how hard that would be to go and try to wage a fight while I'm doing an activity that my son is in and
mhm.
leading it. And so, like, you see all that. And I know my daughter and my son knew that I never got any of the pictures from the marriage that was part of the divorce decree. So they
Oh,
stole hundreds of pictures from their mom and made me an album and gave it to me for Christmas. And when I dealt with the Guardian Ad Litem, I'm like, why would this happen? Like alienation is the act of erasing you. I was erased to the point that they felt compelled, without me asking, to go and steal hundreds of pictures that had me in them with the kids. Why would somebody want that? Why would you want to keep that? She didn't want it for her. She wanted to make sure I didn't have it. And it's the same thing when you're with a partner, that mentality.
oh,
Um,
definitely. In
it,
fact, my ex has all the baby pictures.
it,
And when I left, I didn't, I was taking a whole bunch of stuff and I should have grabbed the photo albums and I didn't. So I've
it's
got that thing.
well, and especially if you flee
Yeah,
in a
right.
sense, because it's one thing to leave, but like, I fled. She
Mhm.
started to trip out, and I started to see a disconnect from reality. And I was like, I can't. I used to think I could protect the kids from it by being there. I couldn't, because that was going to turn on me at some point. And I was like, I have to end this now. And I'm watching all this play out. But you think, like, that mentality of, um, I don't want you,
Mhm.
but I don't want anybody else to want you either.
Mhm.
It's the same as keeping your stuff. I don't really want it. Why would she want? I don't. She's not sitting around there, uh, you know, listfully looking through pictures, going, "Gosh, I wish we were still together." And all. She's not doing that. But I stood up to it and I left. And this is a punishment. You need to be punished for having made the decision to leave. And they don't really want you. They don't want your stuff. They just don't want you to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I find that absolutely unbelievable.
No.
And I think, we can, some people might look past some of it. You really shouldn't, because it's
Mm-hmm.
going to end up coming back to bite you. And,
And it
I'm
will.
glad that leaving this, I didn't leave so negative, because
Mm-hmm.
shit, some people hate the world when they're done. Um, I would speculate that one of the reasons that more has not been learned about alienation is because a good number of the parents have offed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we talk enough about what the actual goal of a malignant narcissist is that you're in a relationship with and you're trying to leave. They're not doing this as petty revenge. This is, I believe, truly, this is them trying to get you to do what they don't have the guts to do. And that is to go take care of yourself and eliminate yourself from the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't have an ounce of doubt that that is the driving force, that they're not trying to make you upset and financially ruin you. They're trying to drive you to commit suicide, or eliminate yourself from the equation and just walk away and never, ever be around again. But I actually slant away from that, because then they can't continually abuse you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they
No,
run
I
out.
think you're absolutely right. Yeah,
It
yeah,
would,
you hit, yeah, definitely.
um, another one that I had, refusing to give you any space. Here's what's interesting is these people don't like you and they terrorize you. And I remember at one point we hit 9 straight months at home that I had not been in the house alone at all for 9 straight months. And it was causing issues. I needed some downtime at home we had 2 young kids. And I remember we'd have the discussion. I'm like, listen, I need, every once in a while, can you take the kids to the store for a half hour? Like, please? Like, I need to be able to like reset after school and everything else. I don't need a lot of time, but I need some. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then wouldn't happen, and continually wouldn't happen. And that comes back to that contrarianism, where you're asking for some space, you're not going to get it. Things that you'll ask for will always be moved away from, and they'll agree to it. Bad faith deals. They'll agree to it. Um, my presence in Wisconsin is based on an absolute bald-faced lie. We were in Florida, and dead set she had to move back. Suddenly, as I'm getting tenure at my job, she needed to be in Wisconsin then. Well, tough to get tenure as a teacher, and I had it, and she didn't want to be stuck down there. So it's interesting that she made the drive and promised everything. We'll let you pick where we live. You get to pick the neighborhood. You get to pick where we are. Okay. All right. Well, I'm a public service employee. I need to live in the city of Milwaukee. I have to. I'll agree to move back if we move to Milwaukee. Okay. Whatever you want. Get here. And I'm still down in Florida and finishing up the move and everything else. And she's up in Wisconsin. And then instantly, I'm not living in Milwaukee. Once she was out of town, was there. Now, we weren't planning on divorcing at that point, but those bad faith deals that are, they know they're lying.
Mm-hmm.
They have no intention to follow through. And I wouldn't give it all that many if it's big things, man. If that happens on 2 or 3 major issues, GTFO, get the fuck out.
Right,
Run
right.
screaming, yell at the neighbors, get a neon sign pointing at the problem. Whatever you do, pick up a brand new pair of running shoes and you sprint away. Get away from it, and because you need to, because it's going to go bad. And
Yes.
I hope that this case, having made the news that it did, that there's a lot of people sitting at home going, holy shit, that sounds like when I argue with my significant other. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, that's them. Like, I understand that now. And I hope this kickstarts a discussion. And I think it's very interesting that so many people who have lived through this recognize the behaviors immediately, because typically, and I get real frustrated with some people in alienation because they put a gender slant on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, this is just women that do this. No, it's not. I
Mm-hmm.
have, in fact, the majority of people who reached out to me were women who have had this happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as much as the borderline disorder has traits of running more through women, but narcissistic disorder does not. That's a lot more balanced. And I think you can, this is a lot more common than people really realize.
Mm-hmm.
happening to people every single day. And I hope people start to go and realize like what coercive language is and how what it's like to be patronized repeatedly, and hearing somebody just kind of belittle and demean you with condescension and everything. And the crazy thing is that they didn't have kids.
Mm.
Can you imagine if they had procreated in that
Oh.
household? Like, would have been a nightmare.
Hmm.
Johnny Depp's kids have both, I've read interviews with, said that they did not get along with her. Well, she was trying to alienate him from them. I guarantee you that was part of her plan. Was I need to wedge a problem, and she's still throwing him under the bus. She criticized him recently because he allowed his teenager to smoke marijuana, and truthfully, I hear that, and I'm like, that's probably a pretty responsible parent move if the kid wanted to do it. Because would you rather have them sneak it and go do it somewhere else with nobody's eyes around them? Or would you rather be like, if you want to try it, like, here you go. Like, I'll help you at least experiment with it so you can find out what the deal is. But man, can you imagine um, using that over somebody? And like, I think that's good logic. I think it's a different way of parenting than I used,
Hmm.
or that I had used on me. But I definitely subscribe closer to that with my
Hmm.
kids, because I wanted them, if you're going to end up doing something, I'd rather have it be with me and make sure that you're not passed out drunk at a party with somebody doing something to you.
Oh,
Um,
exactly.
but
Oh.
even that she tried to play off as like it was irresponsible. And I hear that and go, I don't like, even that sounds an awful lot like somebody searching for reasons to stir up the pot and you know, take whatever he had that mattered away from him. And she did. He lost his film deal
Hmm.
with a franchise he created. And honestly, um, reading his account of losing, I've never watched any of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, so
Oh, they're good.
and I've heard that, and I believe it, and I'm familiar with Jack Sparrow and all this. I mean, I helped raise a Jamaican who goes and dresses up like Jack Sparrow when he goes to talk to kids. He's a professional fighter. He'll go in his Jack Sparrow costume and speak in his Jamaican pirate accent, and it's hilarious. But like, I never really watched a lot of any of those movies. I'm familiar with them, but to see his face talk about losing that character,
Mm.
like, I empathized with it somewhat. And I've been told, I remember one of the things when I did file for divorce, I had just released 2 books, and my ex-wife wanted to come after me for money and royalties for it. It's a person who refused to read a page,
Mm-hmm.
like flatly refused to read a page, but then wanted money from it. And like, fortunately, they didn't make a whole lot. Like, they sold okay and charge a ton. And it was a self-publishing project for me that I did. It's a little different now because they're in paperback, and there's people can pick them up now and do more with them. But at the time, it was new. But even that was like, to me, that's just intellectual property, and you
Hmm.
never even read a page. Why would you even mention that? I got alleged to have secret accounts, which I laugh about because I don't know shit about like even establishing. It took me a year and a half to start an LLC account because I didn't know what to do. And so like I was laughing about it, but she filed like this 50-page, basically a deposition I had to respond to. And I always think back to that. I'm like, you know what? If I could have known then, and I still kind of think this, like, narcissists tell on themselves. And is there evidence that there could be? Well, yeah, because that case that I just had would sure look like there could be secret accounts that money came in and out of that might have paid somebody off.
Hmm.
Um, I know we had massive amounts of money on several occasions go missing, and because I wasn't really allowed to do finances, that was controlled. And let's be clear, not taken away from me at gunpoint, just kind of pitched to you, you're not good at that stuff. I need to do this. If you want to help pay bills, you can write checks. I'll tell you what to. That's not helping the finances. That's
Mm-mm.
that's that's placating you. So you think about those things, and it's crazy because I absolutely think that I think back to that allegation, and I'm going to venture to guess that that fits like a puzzle piece with the amounts of money that went missing out of our account on several occasions before we were divorced. Before, not
Mm.
after. Um, and so I honestly believe like there is something to that, and this is It's a lot of stuff. Like, and I just hope, um, as stuff like this happens to people, that they start researching and they start looking it up. When I was experiencing this in the marriage, going back as early as 99, 2000, son was born in 2001. I was already like could see patterns of behavior and just didn't know what to do with it. And fast forward to 2004 to 2008, like I saw a lot. And in 2009, and you start to realize like, oh, this. It's just like it's a progressive expansion of rotten behaviors.
Mhm.
It just gets, it grows and it grows, and the next thing you know, it is staining you, affecting you professionally.
Mhm.
Ultimatums could be given that hurt you in a career.
Mhm.
Another one I was given before the marriage was I had a chance to graduate. I had enough credits, but I didn't student teach, and I was going to school to be a teacher, and I needed to do one more semester, and it was going to be a tricky thing to pull off. She said, you have to get a job. If we're going to get married, you have to skip student teaching, and you need to just get hired and start making money. Well, I still pay a price that I didn't student teach. I still don't have a full license in the state that I did college and live in. They'll never give me one unless I formally student teach. To transfer a license, I have a license. I have to teach at charter schools though. Even
Oh,
though I've taken all the classes and done everything else and taught for 20 plus years, I still deal with that. So when you look at these bad things people do, and if they stain you long term, shit's bad. Like,
mhm.
like, and you realize that wasn't an accident. They know how to go and
Oh,
throw.
yes.
It's one thing to color on your friend when they pass out with washable markers, right? But you
Mhm.
use the permanent markers, they're going to be scrubbing their face for a while. And
Mhm.
like that's kind of the way that they go. They're going to stain you bad with something that
Yes,
you can't wash away fast.
exactly. I know after with this podcast, I know there's gonna be a lot of people reaching you. How can are you still at the same email, and what do you want it
It's
to say what it is again?
Coach Tomes at everything. And by everything, I mean COACHTOMES at Hotmail, Gmail, or Yahoo. But the Hotmail is the one I use the most. But
Okay.
on Instagram, Um, I am on Facebook with an authors page, author slash MMA coach page, fighter page. Um, I have that, and I have my regular profile on Facebook. I have an Instagram. I have Twitter. Feel free, please reach out to me. Um, you know, I can't tell everybody I can get your story out there specifically, but the goals we have for the documentary are to use my case, include a couple of others, probably look to do 6 to 8 episodes rather than one release as a
Mhm.
movie, and then have it transition into um, a yearly thing where each episode you might detail a couple of cases, or over a season detail like 4 cases and play them out over time. And I think people are attempting to do this through YouTube right now, but um, I think just because I've got a connection through pro sports, that there's a chance this could see some greater light of day and
Oh,
have a little
yes.
bit different spin on it. And with me fighting and everything, it becomes a little bit different. So I'm hoping we can get this out there and um, let this turn into what I really think needs to happen.
Mm,
And I started to realize people near me didn't have any functional knowledge of it
mm,
because I didn't want to bludgeon them with it.
mm.
But you realize they have no context to even have an opinion on it until they start looking into it. So the more that I can get out there to educate the public and to get awareness out there, the better. So
Also,
I,
hey, how do we vote for you?
okay, so I'll send you the link as soon as we get off here. I'll send it to you, and then if you could post that, all they need
Oh,
to do, you
yes.
need to just click the link, and then it is one vote per day. Um, Unless you pay for votes, then you can do more. But I'm happy. The more people that could go vote for me daily, it's only for another week.
Oh,
So
okay.
one more week, if you could keep it up, I would greatly appreciate it. Um,
Okay.
the $20,000 would be highly helpful after being pretty financially ruined through a lot of this. That would be
Oh,
a nice bonus, and plus the publicity for alienation and awareness. So yeah, that would be awesome if people do that. I would really appreciate it. And again, if you
definitely.
have questions, feel free. Please reach out.
Definitely. Oh, I'm so glad I had you on, and we will do this again for sure.
love it. So thank you again for having me on. This is it's been helpful to get some of this out there and to realize, like, you know what, like, there's a lot of this stuff happens and they do stuff in a way to embarrass you to not talk about it.
Mhm.
And you know, maybe it's me turning 50 or the fact that I get punched in the face for money, but I kind of have zero fucks to give anymore.
Yeah.
And like I told them,
Me
you
too.
took my daughter. What else did I have that I would really care about that you could rip from me? There was
Mhm.
nothing else anybody could physically force to take away from me that really mattered. Like they
Mhm.
can't come after my house. They can't come after other things. They can't come after my current wife. They can't come after whatever they want to. They can't do that.
Mhm.
So like, you know, they're going to take what they can, and after that you go, well, if I've lost that, why would I hold back? Why would I not share what I know? So I guess maybe I owe them a small thanks for being so terrible and inspiring
Oh.
to unload all of this.
Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Ben Tomes in the future and other guests. Thank you. Thank you again, Ben.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to whatever the next time happens, and I cannot wait. So, all
Definitely. Thank you.
right, take care.